Alright guys, so in this video we're going to talk all about what to do if the US dollar collapses. All kinds of fear around this right now. You've probably seen all kinds of stuff on the internet with China, wherever else. Oh, they're leaving the US dollar. Do you need to panic? We're going to answer that question today, break it down together. I even got some notes with you to make sure it's really good and you get something valuable out of this. So let's start with what exactly is going on, and then we'll get into what specifically you can do about it. Should you be afraid? That's the first question that you're going to want to ask yourself, and you're going to want to know the answer to, because it's a scary thing when you think about the thought of the US dollar collapsing and all your money going to zero. What happens to your hard-earned savings? And the truth is, it's a little bit more complicated than that. A lot of the fear-mongering stuff on the internet, usually there's some kind of product sale behind it, right? Like they want you to go buy gold, or they want you to go buy this crypto thing by spreading a little bit of fear that the US dollar is going to collapse. And to understand this problem on a little bit deeper of a level, you need to think about the difference between using the US dollar for international payment and using the US dollar as a reserve currency. And it's the reserve currency part of that has been maybe the biggest contributor of American wealth since World War II. And essentially what happened is post-World War II, the US dollar became kind of, we'll call it the gold standard, for lack of a better word, of reserve currencies around the world. Payments were transacted with the US dollar, and countries put their savings in US dollars. And what that's done is it's allowed the US to make money internationally as transactions are made. It's allowed them to finance their debts appropriately and really take advantage of that situation to build a tremendous amount of wealth and power across the world. Now, just because different countries are using payments in something other than the US dollar doesn't necessarily mean the dollar is going to zero. And that's really what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But you can kind of understand why other countries would be concerned after what happened with Russia. And if you think about what really happened there, the US basically cut off their ability to use money by restricting their ability to use US dollars. And that's a pretty scary thing if you're another country. Like, hey, this other country literally just eliminated our ability to transact in a currency, the currency that we've been doing business in for years. So you can kind of understand why other countries are looking at alternatives. And let's just kind of play out what this could look like, because it's generally not as doomsday as what people would lead you to believe, okay? And from the payment side of things, you see countries like China and Brazil, these other countries that are jumping in and eliminating the US dollar from transacting business. That's different from them eliminating holding the US dollar as a reserve currency. What that means is if they exchange business internationally, they're just not going to do that exchange in US dollars. And although that's definitely not a benefit to the US, it will hurt us economically some. It's not going to cause the complete collapse of the US dollar if other countries are just transacting some business in something outside of the US dollar. What most countries do is hold a significant portion of their savings, almost like you would with a savings account, in US dollars. And the reason they do that is because the US dollar is a safe haven. It's appreciated, I shouldn't say it's appreciated, but it's held its value, and it's less likely that it's going to go to zero, right? So if you were to park your money somewhere safe internationally, the US dollar is your best bet to be able to do that. And if you think about trajectory of the US, will it be hurt economically by other countries transacting business in another currency? Sure, but the US still has the strongest economy in the world, has the best businesses in the world, has the most wealth in the world, and it's unlikely that countries are just going to dump all of their US dollars when that is still the case. The scenario that's more likely to play out is you see more countries trying to gain some independence from the US dollar by transacting business in a different way. Maybe portions of reserve currencies are moved, but it's very unlikely the US dollar just collapses overnight, especially if America is still economically strong and provides value on the world stage. Short answer to that question is you probably don't need to panic. With that said though, there's still probably some things you want to do to diversify your risk. If you're anything like me, you don't want all your eggs in one basket, and if all your eggs are in US dollars, they're in one basket, right? So what are some things that you can do to just keep yourself a little bit safer over the next decade or so if the dollar does depreciate in value? Well, the number one thing you can do is create a high income skill. And this could be online business, it could be sales, it could be affiliate marketing, it could be something like trading. But the value of a high income skill is twofold, okay? And you think about the people that are gonna get hurt most from something like a US dollar collapse, it's gonna be your W-2 employees that don't have a ton of power to increase their income, because they're gonna get hit on both ends of it. One, if the US dollar loses value, everything that you buy here is gonna get more expensive. We import a lot of goods, all those imports are gonna get more expensive because our dollar isn't worth as much. And now all of a sudden you're paying more for all the same things that you usually do. On the other end of that, companies' profit margins are going to get squeezed. And when company profit margins get squeezed, they lay off employees, they cut salaries, they replace you with other technologies, artificial intelligence. So the W-2 employee gets squeezed on both ends of that. They're paying more for the same stuff and they're earning less because companies are cutting profit margins. The way that you hedge against that risk is you create some kind of online income skill that is independent of a W-2 job. If you're earning a lot more money, even if things get more expensive, if US dollar loses value, you're still gonna have a big enough cushion to be okay. And that's the number one thing you can do over the next couple of years to hedge against that risk. Commit to learning a skill that will allow you to increase your income potential, because if you simply have a lot more income, economic changes like that will not impact your lifestyle, and that's the most important part. Now there's some other things you can do too, but really that first one helps you do all the rest of these. So think of it like a chain of events, where if you can increase that income ceiling, you can also do the rest of these much, much easier. So the second thing you can do is you can actually invest in great businesses. And there's an emphasis on the word great. All investing in a business is think of it like buying shares of stock. That's really all stock is at the end of the day. It's ownership interest in a business. If you are investing that ownership interest, picking up shares of stock in great businesses, companies like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, that do business all over the world, you get to ride on their coattails during economic changes, okay? It's very unlikely that all of a sudden everyone across the world is gonna wanna stop buying from those companies, even if they're not transacting business in US dollars anymore. You still have the same ownership percentage in that company when you own a share of stock. So even if changes are made with the US dollar, or we're transacting in some other kind of currency, or we're transacting in a digital currency, the companies that are really good are still gonna find a way to benefit from that, because they have billions of dollars at their disposal. They have all the best resources, talent in the world, and you can ride on their coattails just by owning percentages of stock. And then, hey, if you want to sell those shares for any kind of other currency, you can do that. It doesn't have to be US dollars. So owning great companies, really, really important. Now you may want to avoid smaller companies, especially if you're trying to hedge against the risk of a US dollar collapse, because companies that have very low profit margins, that only do business in the US, your smaller cap, kind of high flying tech companies, they may get crushed in that kind of scenario. But if you're invested in good businesses, you have ownership in good businesses, the Warren Buffett way, right? Then you can ride on their coattails through any kind of economic change. Number two thing that you can do is invest in great businesses. Number three is you can invest in real assets. And when I say real assets, I'm really talking about real estate, property, right? You can start to see why increasing your income is important, right? Because it's hard to invest in real estate if you don't have more income, more capital to do it. But if you can do that and invest in property, even if the economy changes, even if the US dollar starts falling in value or collapses, people are always going to need a place to live. And if you own property, you control the property, you can control the pricing around that place to live, and it always gives you a way to print money regardless of what's going on economically, because people need that building, they need that house in order to live, to have shelter. And if you control that property, you've given yourself another hedge. Okay, now next thing you can do is you can spread out your assets even further into something that isn't tied to the US dollar at all. This could be something like gold, could be something like even Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying you want to dump all of your money there. Little pieces are all you need. Do we have pieces in gold? Pieces in something like Bitcoin, where if the US dollar goes backwards, it doesn't impact those assets at all. And as you increase your income, you accumulate more and more pieces in these other assets. So that way, the US dollar has a bad year, something happens, you have this other asset available to you. Can you imagine a scenario where the US dollar does collapse, but you have so much money in gold or Bitcoin that you can go buy property with it? And now you have a hedge against any kind of thing that can happen. So that's how you combine some of these things together. And then the last thing you can do actually plays into number one, which is your high income skill, is you can learn how to trade currencies. So if you pick trading as your high income skill, currency trading is just an extension of any great strategy. So myself personally, I trade pretty much exclusively futures. It's just convenient to do on the hedge fund and some of the other vehicles that I use. But I could just as easily use that same strategy to trade currencies. That gives me the ability to actually profit from the fall of the US dollar if I wanted to. I could go trade in other currencies. I could profit from the fall of the dollar. The reason I like trading is because it's a skill that hedges against all economic risks. You can trade anything, basically at any time, from anywhere all over the world, in any kind of currency. And having that as part of your skill set creates this ultimate hedge against anything that can happen economically. Now, obviously, it starts with a good strategy. You want to have a strategy that's flexible, that can move from approach to approach like that. Topic for another video. But if we put all of this stuff together, you probably don't need to be freaking out at night about your bank account collapsing tomorrow. It's more to it than that. But if you want to hedge against those risks, pick a skill, start increasing your income potential, use that increased income to buy ownership shares in great companies, invest in real assets, to hedge against the US dollar by having assets like gold or something like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. Learn how to trade currencies because you can play any kind of currency that's relevant at that particular time. So hope this video helped, guys. I know it was a little bit longer, but wanted to be valuable for you. Let me know what you think about the US dollar in the comments below. You think it's going to zero? You think it'll be just fine? Let me know, and we'll see you on the next one.